and welcome to Instant Insights. At Global Data Strategic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all sectors. I'm Romilly Leech, and today I'm joined by Aoife McGurk, analyst in the Strategic Intelligence team, to talk about her latest report on deforestation risks, specifically looking at Global Data's new Deforestation Risk framework. There's a lot of content packed into this report, so look out for more episodes in the future on deforestation. Thanks for joining us, Aoife. So, we're all aware of what deforestation is, and it's clear that in the past few decades, forest loss caused by humans has increased, alongside forest degradation. But could you explain to us what you mean exactly by deforestation risk?
Sure. Well, simply put, deforestation risk is the risk that companies are exposed to by having deforestation in either their supply chain or their direct operations. So as you said, deforestation is increasing at the moment. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, estimates that more than 10 million hectares of forests were felled between the years 2010 and 2020 per year. Deforestation itself comes with enormous environmental impacts, driving climate change, weakening ecosystem services, and reducing biodiversity. But there's also significant risk that it poses to companies, which is why we've developed Global Data's Deforestation Risk framework. This includes regulatory, physical, reputational, and financing risks.
Thanks, Aoife. I know you've done a lot of research into the impacts of deforestation on both our environment and the global economy. So before we unpack the new deforestation risk framework, do you think you could give us an overview of how deforestation actually impacts our world?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, deforestation leads to increased greenhouse gas emissions, the big one. Trees remove carbon directly from the air and store it in their roots and trunks for decades, in a process called carbon sequestration. Deforestation then releases that carbon that has been stored in the trees and prevents those trees from being able to sequester any more carbon in the future. Alongside this, we've got the fact that deforestation damages ecosystem services, which often support human habitation. Forests keep our water clean, with 5 major US cities, including New York, relying on nearby forests for drinking water purification. Forests also remove air pollution. So in London, trees remove over 2,000 tonnes of pollution from the air per year, according to the London Tree Officers Association. Alongside this, forestry can also help improve urban stormwater management, ultimately preventing floods. Leaves and branches intercept rainfall, and this reduces the volume of surface runoff, which eventually mitigates the impact of flooding on infrastructure, like drains. And of course, deforestation also damages the ecosystem services that support many sectors. So pollinators supporting agribusiness, the water cycle, making sure harvests are regular, medicinal plants, and natural capital, which shores up a lot of the financial sector.
Thanks, Aoife. That's a really good overview. I think we'll probably go back into how the ecosystem services are damaged a bit later in the podcast, but I think we'll delve into the framework for now. You mentioned earlier regulatory risks. Do you think you could explain this a little bit?
Yeah, no problem. So the regulation of deforestation is ramping up at the moment. This was just a brief overview of the impact of deforestation, which you can read more about in the report. But I'm sure it's clear that the effects are pretty devastating. Governments know this, so they're increasingly regulating against deforestation. New regulations will hold any company whose supply chain involves deforestation accountable for that damage. So the upcoming EU deforestation regulation, or the EUDR, is the most prominent example of these commodity-based regulations. This is where the companies that import any of 7 deforestation-intensive commodities will be held responsible for any deforestation that occurs in their supply chains. Failure to comply with the regulation and perform proper due diligence will leave companies open to massive fines and potentially suspension from the EU market. And this is going to impact a massive proportion of global trade when it comes into force in December 2025. So to mitigate this risk, there are a few things companies should do. They should set a robust no deforestation target. They should engage with suppliers throughout the value chain and integrate deforestation risk into their business strategy and investment strategy. They should also substitute high-risk commodities, so those that lead to a lot of deforestation, for potential alternatives, and invest in supply chain traceability and anti-deforestation technology for their suppliers.
Okay, thanks, Aoife. So this regulatory risk will be impacting companies who use deforestation in their supply chains. But what about those driving deforestation through their operations? So like the construction sector, for example. Is there regulation in place for that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So while sectors like consumer goods and packaging are at risk from the new supply chain regulation, the mining, construction and agriculture sectors face regulatory risk for using deforestation in their direct operations. Some examples of regulations that generate this regulatory risk include Brazil's Forest Code, Indonesia's Forest Moratorium, and India's Forest Conservation Act.
Okay, so I'm assuming tackling this specific risk also involves setting a no deforestation target, like you mentioned. But is there anything else that companies can do that you could expand on?
So a no deforestation target is key for any kind of regulatory risk here. But companies can also improve the efficiency of their agricultural operations, and they can invest in anti-deforestation technology, which will ultimately reduce the likelihood of any forest loss occurring at all.
Okay, thanks, Aoife. Let's go back to the framework now. So we've looked at regulatory risks. What other risks are we looking at in the framework?
Well, another big one is physical risk, and this is the risk that companies face due to the physical impacts of deforestation. So I briefly touched on this earlier, but the drivers of this risk include climate change, loss of pollinators, and changes to the water cycle, which can all seriously impact the production of agricultural commodities, which lots of supply chains rely on. So companies that rely heavily on these regular harvests will find themselves in an extremely risky position. And on top of this, tropical forest loss can decimate medicinal plant populations, including those yet to be discovered, putting future farmer revenue at risk as well. And this all looks set to destabilise the agriculture sector as well as consumer, healthcare and financials.
Do you think you could tell us a bit more about the reputational risk that companies can face from all of this?
Yeah, definitely. So this could include consumers boycotting companies and activist investors exerting pressure as well is a big thing. Something that's intensified this risk is social media and an increased public awareness of companies' ESG credentials. Often this is driven by a concern for animals and climate change, which are sort of a big deal in the public consciousness at the moment. But we also can't forget the financial risks that companies face as well because of destroying natural capital.
Okay, but this is a really great overview of the risks posed to companies. I've just got a final question for you. You've mentioned a few times that it's key for companies to set up a no deforestation target, but what exactly does that look like?
I'd say that a robust no deforestation target signals to consumers and regulators alike that a company is serious about preventing deforestation. So there are many certifications, such as approval from the Science Based Targets Initiative. They require companies to set a no deforestation target. The Climate, Community and Biodiversity Alliance certification also requires companies to set such a target. And the target itself should be cross-commodity. It should cover all of the high-risk commodities that lead to deforestation. And it should also cover all segments of the supply chain, not just the basic materials or the finished product. And it should cover all geographies, not just one section of tropical rainforest. You should be looking at, your global supply chain. And finally, it should be time-bound and quantifiable, so you can make sure you're hitting the target. It's not just some abstract, we might do this in the future.
Are there any companies that have already set this no deforestation target?
Yeah, there are a few. So I think one of the big ones is Tesco, this retailer that operates throughout the UK and EU. It has a very robust no deforestation target. It's committed to sourcing 100% of its soy and palm oil from verified and deforestation-free areas by December 2025. And it's also committed to ensuring that coffee, cocoa, rubber and timber are all deforestation-free. And while there's no specific provision for cattle within Tesco's target, in 2018 the retailer halted its purchases of Brazilian beef due to concerns about deforestation. So it's definitely serious about it.
Thanks, Aoife. Unfortunately, I think that's all we've got time for today, but that was a really interesting overview and insight into your deforestation risk report, which is available now on our intelligence centres and in the link below. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for those instant insights. Thanks for listening. And from us in Strategic Intelligence, we'll see you next time.